Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. Today we bring you some news Andrew Parker Bowles reveals. Camilla's shocked betrayal of King Charles amid financial scandal. Brigadier Andrew Parker Bowles, the first spouse of Queen Camilla, has broken a 30-year silence in a unique narrative that might alter the official history of the world's most renowned love tale. His disclosures depict a harrowing image of ambition, sacrifice, and a family methodically disassembled in the quest for power. During the harsh winter of 2024, a thick fog engulfed London, its frigid air permeating the city's ancient streets and obscuring the recognizable silhouettes of its majestic landmarks. It served as an apt metaphor for the obscurity that has long enveloped one of the royal family's most fundamental narratives. In a remote Wiltshire residence, a distinct flame was being kindled not from the warm light of a fireplace, but from the incisive words of Andrew Parker Bowles, a figure whose name is permanently etched in the narrative of King Charles III and Queen Camilla. In a poorly illuminated study, the wind's sorrowful howl pressed on the window panes, while a solitary bulb projected elongated shadows over a visage marked by the serene dignity of a life mostly spent away from public scrutiny. Andrew Parker Bowles, his demeanor still indicative of a former cavalry officer's discipline, confronted a camera for the first time in decades. His eyes, etched with the profound lines of experience, glowed with a subdued determination, the expression of a man who had faced battlefields in his childhood and bore the invisible scars of a personal conflict, fought inside the confines of his home. For 30 years he had remained the unvoiced figure, the specter at the royal feast. He had now opted to speak. "Charles did not dissolve our marriage," he said, his voice deep and resonant, each syllable articulated with a purposeful gravity that demanded attention. "That is the narrative presented to the world, the convenient account. However, that is not the veracity. Our marriage was internally ignited. Camilla ignited the match as her desire for the throne surpassed her longing for a family. These were not the acrimonious accusations of a wronged spouse seeking retribution. They were articulated as the earnest commitment of an individual who felt obligated to rectify a historical narrative he saw to be constructed on a basis of inaccuracies. A guy saw the lady he loved departing not just from him, but also from his children in an unyielding pursuit of the monarchy." Shortly after his testimony emerged, the meticulously crafted facade of the royal romance started to destabilize. Prominent publications, including The Times, The Guardian, and The Sun, reacted strongly. "Parker Bowles, Camilla's aspiration devastated," our family proclaimed one headline. "The Queen's Gambit, ex-husband discloses calculated ascent to crown," said another. A contentious discussion erupted on social media with millions analyzing the information. Was Camilla the loving partner who awaited her prince with patience, or a cunning strategist who compromised her own family for the ultimate reward? At Buckingham Palace, the news arrived with the impact of a seismic tremor. A tangible feeling of apprehension permeated the ornate hallways. Royal advisors adept in crisis management, with composed expressions and meticulously formulated pronouncements, gathered in urgent, discreet discussions that extended late into the night. In expansive chambers adorned with wood and illuminated by shimmering chandeliers, voices were tense with apprehension. A senior advisor said, "We must contain this immediately," clutching a china teacup as if it were a lifeline amid a tempest. Should the public come to endorse his narrative, the Queen's approval and her legitimacy in the public perception may be jeopardized. A plan was promptly formulated. A distinguished public relations specialist recognized for his tact and persuasive charisma would be sent to Wiltshire. The ambassador was Sir Edward Langley, an experienced media strategist with a congenial demeanor and a keen intellect, skilled at quelling royal controversies before they escalated. He came to Andrew's unpretentious but refined residence with a proposal of assistance, along with a series of implicit cautions. Sir Edward entered the drawing room with the assured poise of an individual used to managing challenging conversations. "Mr. Parker Bowles," he commenced, his tone as smooth as silk. "Disclosing these memories would just inflict unneeded suffering and disrupt much. The palace is ready to provide comprehensive assistance to guarantee the protection of your privacy. We suggest 30 years." Andrew said, his tone as incisive and resolute as granite. He stood before the fireplace, attired in a modest tweed jacket, but exuding an authority that Langley's Savile Row suit could not rival. His eyes exhibited no rage, but a deep, unsettling conviction. "For 3 decades, I have remained silent. I have let you, the palace, and the press construct history according to your desires. I allowed Camilla to assume the role of a sympathetic figure, a queen in waiting. I allowed Charles to assume the role of the protagonist in a vast, tragic romance. However, that narrative necessitated antagonists and sufferers, and my children and I were assigned parts we did not choose. It is now my turn to talk." His statement was succinct and firm and allowed no opportunity for discussion. Langley, skilled in coercing compliance and negotiating discretion, encountered an unyielding obstacle. He departed the uncommon sensation of defeat permeating the atmosphere, the shutting door resonating with the conclusiveness of Andrew's choice. This was not just a statement of individual dissatisfaction. It was a commitment to reveal concealed realities, to reignite wounds that the monarchy had spent decades healing, and to unveil the rifts inside a family fractured by what he characterized as one woman's relentless and singular quest for power. What precisely did Camilla relinquish in exchange for her crown, who, amid the shadows of the throne, incurred the ultimate sacrifice? The inquiries were no longer just whispered rumors. The guy who had once loved her and constructed a life with her was now questioning her, as all he had created had become collateral damage in her pursuit of a kingdom. The golden couple, and the initial fractures. To comprehend the magnitude of the purported treachery, one must revisit the 1970s, a period characterized by lavish aristocratic assemblies, exhilarating polo matches, and vigorous fox hunts among the verdant hills of Britain. In the illustrious milieu of Gloucestershire society, Andrew Parker Bowles and Camilla Shand were the pair under constant scrutiny. They embodied the quintessential upper-class ideal, their visages on the pages of Tatler as they promenaded arm in arm at opulent galas, or rode with certain elegance at rural hunts. Camilla, characterized by her infectious laughter, disheveled blonde hair, and keenly observant eyes, radiated a natural charisma that was both accessible and captivatingly self-assured. Andrew, tall and charming, had the authoritative presence of a Blues and Royals cavalry commander, embodying the idealized character that captivated several aristocratic young women. They seemed to be an ideal pairing, a romance that their exclusive group deemed fated for a serene, joyful, and traditional existence. Camilla was the woman who instilled in me the belief that love could triumph over all, Andrew contemplated in his 2024 narrative, his tone a blend of nostalgia and melancholy. I was erroneous. Her ambition was a formidable force aimed toward a goal that transcended our shared existence. Ultimately, she did not love me. She cherished the notion of a destiny she believed had been stolen from her, and she would pursue it relentlessly to restore it. It is a well-documented fact of royal history that Camilla had a short but passionate romance with Prince Charles in 1971. They encountered one another at a Windsor polo tournament facilitated by a mutual acquaintance, and their bond was instant and intense. Nevertheless, the stringent limitations imposed by the monarchy rendered their relationship unfeasible. Charles was poised to enlist in the Royal Navy, while Camilla, despite her noble lineage, was deemed inadequate in terms of virginity and status to be a prospective Princess of Wales. With that opportunity obviously extinguished, Camilla reverted to the sphere of Andrew Parker Bowles, her intermittent boyfriend, and a man of exemplary reputation within their social circle. In 1973, they married in an elaborate ceremony at the Guards Chapel, an occasion celebrated by the media as the social wedding of the year. However, Andrew asserts that, although the ring on her finger and the subsequent children, Tom, born in 1974, and Laura in 1978, Camilla's heart and aspirations never really belonged to him. Following the births of their children, it was anticipated that Camilla would acclimate to her responsibilities as a rural spouse and mother. Instead, she discreetly re-established her relationship with Prince Charles, who had subsequently wed Lady Diana Spencer. Andrew now asserts that this clandestine contact was not just a romantic entanglement, it marked the start of a protracted strategic endeavor. The first victims of her effort were her own children. On an evening in 1988, 10-year-old Laura waited at the drawing room window of Bolhide Manor, awaiting her mother's return after a purportedly brief excursion to London. Camilla was absent. A courier instead brought an ornate, costly doll accompanied by a brief written letter. "Mother is currently engaged, dear. Be good." Laura grasped the porcelain doll, its frigid painted grin a harsh parody of the parental affection she desired. Tears cascaded down her cheeks, the anguish of desertion penetrating more profoundly than any childhood injury. "I retained that doll for years," a mature Laura allegedly said to a close friend in 2025, her voice wavering. It represented her absence, an exquisite vacant object intended to substitute a mother's presence. However, it was incapable of reciprocating my embrace. She was selecting a realm in which Tom and I were excluded. Tom, 4 years senior to Laura, carried a distinct kind of injury, one shaped by a blend of youthful animosity and an emerging, appalled awareness. In 1989, at the age of 15, he was perusing his mother's study for a book when he discovered a folder of letters. Included was communication from Charles. It was not an ardent love letter, but rather a disquieting communication for the adolescent male, a calculated discourse on the discreet elevation of Camilla as a public persona, a reliable associate of the prince poised to emerge when the moment was opportune. Despite his youth, Tom saw the significance his family was a stage, a backdrop in a narrative orchestrated by his mother. He faced her later that day in the drawing room, the letter grasped in his quivering fingers. "Mother, what actions are you imposing upon us?" "For father," he insisted, his voice trembling with a mix of trepidation and rage. Camilla, with a composed and evaluative demeanor, purportedly said, "Tom, you are too youthful to comprehend. This is beyond us. It pertains to fate." Those remarks obliterated the remnants of Tom's youthful infatuation. That was the moment I ceased to perceive her merely as my mother. He would later recount to a colleague, his eyes still ablaze with the recollection. She was a tactician. We were just pawns. Camilla's desire, as characterized by Andrew, was not just inattentive, it was persistently proactive. She used her family as a facade and a support, meticulously constructing an image of a loving spouse and mother to the public while surreptitiously advancing towards the throne. During a charity banquet in 1988, she accompanied a young Laura beaming for the cameras while holding her hand, exemplifying parental affection. However, as the flashbulbs ceased, she sent Laura to a babysitter and devoted the remainder of the evening to an extensive dialogue with a notable journalist, discreetly seeking suggestions on how to cultivate her public image. Andrew, seeing from afar, had a chilling apprehension. She was not only attending an event, she was cultivating connections for a prospective job. At Highgrove, she was not a guest, remembered Mary Compton, a family acquaintance, in a recent interview. She comported herself as though she were already the mistress of the residence. I recall her once asserting with unsettling assurance, "Mary, one day people will see that I am destined for Charles." I was taken aback. That was not only love expressing itself, it was a manifestation of entitlement, a princess's caution and a brother's treachery. Andrew was grappling with the anguish of his children. He was poised to receive a candid admonition from a credible royal source, Princess Anne. Anne and Andrew were romantically engaged in the early 1970s before his marriage to Camilla, and they have maintained a strong, trusted friendship. On a brisk autumn evening in 1989, in a dimly illuminated Gloucestershire tavern, where oil lamps emitted a soft radiance onto aged wooden walls, Anne drew Andrew into a secluded corner. The cheerful conversation of other guests did not alleviate the tension that lingered between them. "Andrew, are you unable to see?" Anne started, her tone subdued but incisive, her pragmatic disposition fully evident. Her hands clutched the wine glass as if to restrain her rage. "Camilla is not only enamored with Charles, she is fixated by the crown. She showcases you and the children at public occasions, exuding the demeanor of an ideal country wife, leading the press to label her a devoted family woman. However, I have seen her at Highgrove. I have seen her overseeing personnel, participating in meetings about Charles's public responsibilities, and cultivating relationships with public relations experts to strategize her image for the day Diana is ultimately marginalized. She is exploiting you. She is using Tom and Laura like pawns in a chess match. You must cease this, Andrew, before she obliterates everything." Andrew, grasping his pint of ale, had a wave of protective wrath. Every comment from Anne was a direct attack on the tenuous hope he maintained that Camilla, despite all her misdeeds, still harbored affection for him and his children. "Anne, you fail to comprehend," he said, his fingers blanching over the glass. "She is my spouse. She may have deviated, but I feel she still has affection for us. I am capable of resolving this issue. I must." His statement was not only a challenge to Anne, but also a fervent appeal to himself, an endeavor to re-establish a reality that was eluding his grasp. Anne shook her head, her eyes reflecting a mix of sadness and sympathy. "You are deluding yourself, Andrew," she said, her tone becoming more frigid, but still infused with genuine concern. "This is not the Camilla you wed. I have eavesdropped on her conversations with advisors on the monarchy's future, as if she is already a pivotal player inside it. She desires not only the person, but also the institution itself. She will overpower you, Tom and Laura, to get it. If you do not confront this reality, your family will suffer the consequences." She placed her glass down with a definitive clink, the sound serving as a last acute admonition. Andrew stood suddenly, his chair dragging across the hardwood floor, his eyes aflame with anger, overshadowed by an encroaching, unsettling uncertainty. "You possess no authority to evaluate my wife," he fumed, his voice resonating throughout their section of the tavern. He exited into the frigid Gloucestershire night, although Anne's words had sown a seed of malice. The dispute concluded in a profound, unresolved stillness, although it signified a pivotal moment. The injuries sustained by Tom and Laura, exacerbated by Anne's ignored caution, indicated an impending crisis, one that would soon culminate in a public scandal exposing the whole magnitude of Camilla's treachery and subjecting the Parker Bowles family to severe public humiliation. The offspring of the controversy. The 1993 Camilla-Gate incident, including the public disclosure of private phone conversations between Charles and Camilla, reverberated across Britain. The incident was a significant humiliation for Princess Diana and a serious blemish on the monarchy. The media extensively covered the facts, prompting popular discourse on the prince's adultery from London pubs to Yorkshire villages. However, the ramifications of Camilla-Gate extend beyond the confines of the palace and sensationalist media coverage. The situation resulted in an unforeseen and distressing confrontation between two youngsters, both unwitting victims of adult ambition, 15-year-old Laura Parker Bowles and 11-year-old Prince William. The meeting occurred at a charitable function in London in early 1993. Andrew, seeking to provide his daughter with a diversion from the chaos at home, had taken Laura to the gala. Simultaneously, Princess Diana, a devoted mother, had accompanied William to impart the significance of public duty. William, nurtured by Diana to embody empathy and wisdom beyond his age, was generally polite and considerate. However, the incident had provoked a passionate protective indignation inside him, a profound animosity for the public humiliation of his mother. In a secluded passage far from the main dining area, Laura inadvertently encountered William. The typically quiet young prince erupted upon recognizing her as Camilla's daughter. "Your mother is the cause of my mother's misery," he yelled, his voice quaking with a rage that was astonishing for an 11-year-old. His eyes, always soft, were crimson with unspilled tears of fury. "Are you aware of the number of nights my mother has wept due to your mother's actions? She is an adulteress." Laura, taken aback by the malice in his comments, felt her meticulously maintained calm disintegrate. The acute anguish of her mother's departure emerged. "I did not choose for my mother to act in that manner," she exclaimed, her voice faltering as tears cascaded down her cheeks. "Do you believe I am not in pain? My mother does not want either my brother or me. We are all casualties in this situation." The succinct but savage altercation left both youngsters quaking, their little emotions ensnared in a maelstrom of treachery and anguish beyond their comprehension. Diana, with a maternal intuition, saw the tension from across the room and promptly intervened. She drew William aside, crouching before him to establish eye contact. "William," she said, her tone kind but resolute, "I am aware that you are suffering on my behalf. However, Laura is not her mother. Do not allow your anger to adversely affect someone who is as innocent in this matter as you are." William, trembling with fury, gazed into his mother's eyes, where he saw not resentment, but a deep sorrow and a resilience that transcended her anguish. "You are correct, mother," he murmured, remorse gradually extinguishing the embers of his fury. That evening, under his mother's guidance, William pursued Laura. With his gaze down, he said, "I apologize, Laura. I ought not to have made such statements." Laura, despite her lingering injuries, saw the genuineness in his apologies. "That moment will remain etched in my memory," she would subsequently reveal. William was merely a boy, yet he exhibited greater kindness in that apology than my mother had demonstrated towards me in years. I recognized that compassion originated from Diana. The confrontation transcended a mere emotional eruption. The scandal's repercussions were inflicting harm on innocent youngsters on both sides of the issue. This prompted Diana to do a kind gesture that would have significant repercussions, culminating in a clandestine meeting with Andrew Parker Bowles, a meeting that would empower him to ultimately terminate his fractured marriage. The elegance of a princess. The enlightenment of a father. In late 1993, troubled by the anguish shown in her son's and Laura's eyes, Princess Diana decided to undertake a personal act of reconciliation. She composed a letter to Andrew Parker Bowles, inscribed in her graceful, sincere handwriting. "Dear Mr. Parker Bowles," it said, "I express my profound apologies over the remarks William made to your daughter. The children are innocent in this matter, and it is our collective responsibility as parents to protect them from the burdens of adult behavior. I would really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you to personally extend my apologies and perhaps identify shared objectives in safeguarding our children from these traumas." The meeting was scheduled in a secluded Kensington tea shop, an enchanting venue illuminated by the gentle golden light of lanterns reflecting on flowery wallpaper. The pleasant, friendly ambiance could not, however, entirely eradicate the deep grief that resided in Diana's eyes. Andrew came despondent, his pride still wounded by years of living in the shadow of his wife's aspirations. Upon seeing Diana attired in a modest but sophisticated blue cloak, her renowned eyes fatigued, yet kind, he had an unforeseen sensation of affinity, two spirits intertwined by the same tempest. "Andrew," Diana said, her tone soft but imbued with emotion, her hands intertwined on the table as if to stabilize herself. I really regret the situation with William. He is pained by the content of the newspapers and the malicious murmurs he overhears. However, his ire was unwarranted, and Laura was undeserving of it. Our children, Laura, Tom, William, and Harry, are the innocent parties. They ought not to get ensnared in the conflicts of their parents' life. Andrew, profoundly affected by her authenticity and absence of artifice, could but nod a constriction developing in his throat. The vision of Laura's tear-stained visage, anticipating a mother who never returned, surged in his thoughts. Diana persisted, a melancholic but steadfast grin on her lips. "I am aware that you are also in pain, Andrew. I see it in your gaze, much like how I recognize my anguish in the mirror each morning. Parenthood is beyond just affection. It involves trying to protect our children from uncontrollable adversities. I have endeavored to do that for William and Harry, and I understand you want to do likewise for Laura and Tom." She described providing solace to her boys during evenings laden with distressing news and maintaining a courageous front to prevent their world from disintegrating. "I am unable to alter Charles, just as you are unable to alter Camilla," she said, her voice suddenly deep and commanding. "However, we can provide our children with a refuge. We can demonstrate that they are not characterized by our errors. Laura is a resilient person, Andrew, and you are the paternal figure she needs at this moment." For the first time in years, Andrew had a genuine sense of recognition. Just then his carefully tended walls fell apart. "I have disappointed them," he said, his voice quivering with a tenderness he had never shown to anybody. "I have allowed Laura and Tom to suffer for an excessive duration." Diana extended her hand across the table and rested it on his, her touch both kind and assertive. "The past is immutable, Andrew," she said, her gaze unwavering. "However, we can provide our children with a future in which they need not bear these scars indefinitely. William has expressed remorse to Laura. I trust you will assist her in seeing that she is not isolated in this situation. Diana was the most formidable individual I have ever encountered," Andrew reminisced in his 2025 narrative. "She not only apologized on behalf of her son, she granted me the authorization to assume the role of a father once again. Her statement, 'Our children are innocent,' became my guiding principle. They instilled in me the fortitude to ultimately face Camilla and terminate a marriage that had been defunct for years. The gathering at the tea shop transcended mere apologies. It constituted a revelation. Diana's compassion had cultivated an unexpected partnership and endowed Andrew with a renewed sense of purpose. He departed not with resentment, but with a definitive, anguished determination he would save his children, even if it meant dismantling the last remnants of his existence with Camilla. You were merely a stepping stone. The winter of 1994 enveloped Wiltshire in a harsh frost that seemed to penetrate the very bones of Bolehide Manor. The home, once a refuge of familial warmth, now resembled a frigid, shattered shell. One evening, Camilla returned after a visit to Highgrove, her demeanor unusually irritated. She traversed the spotless hardwood floors, leaving a trail of dirt, her gaze intense with the tempest she had brought back from Gloucestershire. Andrew, who had suffered through his wife's lies and apathy for years, had a renewed fervor inside him. Diana's words reverberated in his thoughts. He could no longer remain silent, not for his personal benefit, but for Tom and Laura. "Camilla," he said, his voice subdued but resolute, surprising her. "You have deceived me for years. The nocturnal communications and the excursions to London. Do you believe I am oblivious? Specify your desires. Is it Charles? Is it the seat of power? Or is it a combination of both?" The chamber became quiet. Camilla halted, her hand immobilized as she disrobed her coat. Her eyes, as piercing as steel, exhibited the composed determination of one who had taken her decision long ago. For a brief instant she seemed ready to provide a soothing remark, a customary diversion. However, as if concluding that the facade was superfluous, she discarded all pretense. "Andrew," She said, her tone emotionless. "You were merely a means to an end. An essential element, albeit a mere stepping stone. I was never intended to be here." The words cut through the air harsh and relentless, shattering the last tattered bond of their marriage. Andrew remained still, the whiskey glass in his palm almost falling from his grip. He experienced neither anger nor acute agony, simply an expansive void-like emptiness, as if his soul had been extracted. However, the genuine torment of the moment was still to arrive. The drawing-room door emitted a creaking sound as it opened. At 16, Laura stood at the doorway, her face marked by recent weeping. She had eavesdropped on every utterance. "Father." She wept, her voice faltering. "Doesn't Mother love us at all?" Andrew knelt embracing his terrified daughter, although he had no response. How could he elucidate that her mother had prioritized a crown above her own offspring? Tom, now 20, emerged from the shadows of the corridor. His hands were clenched, and his eyes burned with the wrath of a son who had seen his family crumble. "What basis do you have for making that statement?" he vociferated at Camilla, his voice trembling with fury. "You deserted us. You deserted Father, on his behalf, for a title." Camilla, unperturbed, confronted her son's seething glare with a frigid composure. "You would not comprehend, Tom. This is my fate." Her remarks constituted a further lethal strike. "At that moment, I desired her removal from our lives," Tom would later say, his voice still laden with resentment. "From that day forward, I recognized she was no longer my mother." While Andrew remained alone by the extinguishing fire, long after Camilla had withdrawn to her chamber, he contemplated Diana. "Our offspring are untainted." However, Laura and Tom were suffering the consequences of Camilla's ambition, and he had neglected to safeguard them. Camilla's stepping stone comment was only the last harsh blow. It marked the moment of Andrew's emancipation. Equipped with the moral conviction imparted by Diana, he determined to extricate himself and his children from the devastation, to discreetly withdraw from the royal arena, bearing his dignity and the permanent marks of his family's sacrifice. A subdued triumph and an inaugural commencement. The 1995 divorce of Andrew and Camilla Parker Bowles was executed with the meticulousness of a military operation. There were no dramatic headlines, no expose interviews, and no public disparagement. However, behind the composed, calm, and intense struggle ensued, not for wealth or possessions, but for the guardianship of Tom and Laura. Camilla, exhibiting a measured detachment, originally pursued custody, a decision Andrew saw as driven not by motherly feeling, but by the need to maintain her public persona. Andrew, equipped with a father's steadfast determination, engaged in the legal battle, ready to endure the considerable pressure from the royal establishment to ensure his children's future. In a secluded London courtroom, shielded from media scrutiny, 21-year-old Tom and 17-year-old Laura were summoned to testify. Tom, his eyes reflecting the fierce determination from that last encounter, said, "I wish to reside with my father. He is the only individual who has consistently supported us." Laura, her voice quavering but resolute, said, "My mother selected her course long ago. My father constitutes my sanctuary." Their comments, sharp as daggers, determined the legal resolution and signified the poignant dissolution of the relationship between Camilla and her children. Andrew was awarded exclusive custody. The win was subtle but significant. "I wish to prevent Tom and Laura from becoming subjects of the scandal pages," Andrew said in 2025, his tone softening at the reference to his children. Custody was never a matter of triumphing over Camilla. It pertained to honoring my commitment to them and to myself, ensuring they would never endure such pain again. Subsequent to the divorce, Andrew Parker Bowles withdrew from the high society limelight, adopting a life of serene fulfillment he had not before envisioned. He wed Rosemary Pittman, a long-standing companion whose kind disposition and authentic character provided him a tranquility he had long been deprived of. They established a humble farm in Wiltshire, where the sound of horses' hooves and the rustling of foliage supplanted the din of royal galas. He cared for his horses, delighted in his grandkids, and relished tranquil days with literature and tea. Princess Diana once conveyed to me that forgiveness constitutes a manifestation of strength. He said, his tone kind but certain. I learned not to delete the past, but to construct a future for Tom and Laura. A significant and revealing occurrence occurred during the wedding of Charles and Camilla in April 2005. Andrew was there sitting silently in the third row as a sign of tranquility for his children. As Camilla approached the realization of her lifetime dream, she traversed the aisle, her gaze surveying the assembly. For a brief moment, they made eye contact with Andrew. Her emotions at that moment remain inscrutable, whether it was a fleeting remorse or the serene pleasure of a goal realized. However, Andrew, his expression revealing no resentment, offered a subtle, almost undetectable nod. I experienced a sense of liberation, he reminisced. Not due to my forgiveness of her, but because I had attained my own tranquility, accompanied by Tom, Laura, and my new family. That was an endowment the crown could never bestow upon her, nor could it ever deprive me of it. The Reckoning. Andrew Parker Bowles's 2025 narrative was not a manifestation of retribution. He said that it was an act of historical rectification. His narrative transcended human experience. It served as a warning tale for the institution of monarchy itself. I trust that the forthcoming generation, Prince William and Princess Catherine, comprehend, he said, his tone soft but significant. The crown is a significant burden sometimes acquired at the cost of shattered hearts. Not every crown is donned with dignity. At Kensington Palace, Prince William, now the Prince of Wales, reportedly perused the transcript of Andrew's testimony in the solitude of his private study. His response remained as ever confidential. An assistant saw that he then put the paper in a drawer behind a framed image of his mother. The public, previously eager to accept the narrative of Charles and Camilla's lasting love, was now compelled to face a more somber and intricate truth. Did Camilla really love Charles, or was she a calculating strategist who saw him as a means to an end? Was Charles a romantic hero, or an active contributor to the disintegration of two families, Andrew Parker? Bowles now lives in the serene solitude of the English countryside, accompanied by horses and grandkids. He pursued neither notoriety nor authored any spectacular autobiography. However, his utterances once spoken could not be retracted. They linger in the atmosphere like an enduring specter above the throne. Camilla did not betray me for another man, he said, his last words eerily exact. She betrayed our family for the sake of a future. Occasionally, the demise of a marriage is not precipitated by the fervor of infidelity. It is the frigid, quiet expanse of aspiration. As King Charles III and Queen Camilla governed the British monarchy, their narrative transcends a mere romance defying adversity. It is now irrevocably connected to the narrative of the guy they abandoned and the children who suffered the consequences. The long-buried truth has emerged, prompting the world to reconsider. How does this discovery alter our perception of the Queen? What does it disclose about the significant, often harsh sacrifices concealed under the opulent facade of royal splendor? Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts and goodbye for now.